The Kingston Corporation's annual gala shimmered. Crystal chandeliers blazed, illuminating a vibrant scene of laughter, clinking glasses, and high-stakes contract signings. CEO Veronica Kingston, the most powerful figure in the room, commanded attention. Yet in a quiet corner by the wall, a small girl in a white dress stood motionless, clutching a teddy bear. No one noticed that this child was the daughter of the woman orchestrating the entire event. A young janitor, his uniform bearing a fresh smudge of water, worked diligently nearby. As he bent to collect his tools, a voice as soft as mist broke the silence. "Excuse me, sir. Will you dance with me?" The roar of the crowd instantly died. The CEO turned, and the little girl's world and her mother's changed forever. The year-end gala was, for 38-year-old CEO Veronica Kingston, an annual declaration of power. It was her arena to impress shareholders, partners, and the entire C-suite. Tonight she was dressed in a pristine white pantsuit, her expression sharp, but the faint, dark circles beneath her eyes betrayed months of sleepless nights. 3 years ago, a painful divorce had left her a single mother. Her work, however, had steadily consumed her life, transforming her office into her only home. This crushing dedication left her only daughter, 8-year-old Emily, largely overlooked. Emily was an exceptionally gentle, sensitive, and profoundly well-behaved child. She possessed an inner quietness that made her seem older than her years. She never demanded attention, never caused a scene, a behavior trait that, ironically, allowed her to be easily forgotten in the overwhelming glamour and noise of the adult world. Tonight was no different. Emily stood patiently by the ornate columns, her small body barely visible against the velvet drapery, watching the beautiful dresses twirl to the slow, sweeping music. No one's gaze ever paused on her. Veronica, utterly consumed, was shaking hands with partners, exchanging confident smiles, reviewing a last-minute contract, and discussing her aggressive 2026 acquisition strategy. She was a machine of precision and commerce. She failed to notice her daughter clenching her teddy bear so tightly that her knuckles were turning white and red. The bear named Whisper was her only reliable companion in these loud, cold spaces. Meanwhile, at the far end of the ballroom, 34-year-old Ethan Cole, the building's newest janitor, was carefully mopping up a minor water spill that had threatened to stain the priceless Persian rug. Ethan was a man of quiet history. He was formerly a sought-after high-end bartender, and in his younger, freer years, he had even taught competitive Latin dance. But after his wife's sudden passing in a hit-and-run accident, he gave it all up. He needed stable, undemanding work with fixed hours. He chose the janitorial job because it allowed him to wear an invisibility cloak, to keep his head down and avoid the complexities of the outside world. He worked fiercely, saving every penny for his 6-year-old son, Leo, who was currently staying with his grandmother. The music flowed, a sweeping, romantic waltz, but the adults were trapped in their conversations, their egos, and their champagne glasses. Emily watched from her corner, the music washing over her, making her feel even more transparent. Every person who passed by, every high-heeled shoe, every booming laugh, seemed to look right through her, treating her like a decorative fixture. She held on to a small, desperate hope that just one person might acknowledge her presence, might ask, "Are you having fun, dear?" But the question never came. Her eyes drifted towards the janitor. He was crouched down, gathering his simple tools. His concentration focused entirely on the mundane task of cleanliness. His face was kind, unburdened by the financial pressures or the social ladder climbing of the guests. He wasn't busy with the flash and polish. He was just real. Emily felt an immediate magnetic pull towards him because, in that entire colossal, echoing hall, he was the only person who did not make her feel utterly alone. Ethan jumped slightly when he saw a tiny pair of patent leather shoes planted directly in front of him. He looked up, his movements hesitant, offering a gentle, tired smile. "Did you lose your way, kiddo?" Emily shook her head, her eyes wide with a profound adult sadness. "No, nobody notices me here." Ethan immediately stopped what he was doing and carefully set the mop and bucket aside. He looked at her, not at the shoes or the expensive dress, but into her eyes. "I see you. Bertado, the simple, declarative statement made Emily's eyes ignite with a sudden, beautiful light. For the first time all evening, and perhaps for the first time in months, someone had truly seen her, not the CEO's daughter, but just Emily. She took a huge, shuddering breath, her small chest rising, and then she spoke the words that were tiny, but landed like thunder in Ethan's heart. "Sir, will you dance with me?" Ethan froze mid-movement. The ballroom continued its clamorous operation, yet time felt perfectly suspended just between the two contrasting figures. Ethan glanced wildly around. Her parents, whoever they were clearly too occupied to even glance their way. "Are you absolutely certain?" he whispered. Emily gave a delicate, resolute nod. Before Ethan could formulate a response, a sharp, cold voice cut through the air directly behind them. "Emily, what in the world are you doing?" Achte. Veronica strode over, her face a mask of cold fury, and pulled her daughter's arm towards her. Several guests nearest them exchanged knowing, critical looks, while others covered their mouths trying to stifle sneering laughter. "The CEO's kid is begging the janitor to dance. What a scene!" Ethan instantly dropped his head, his face burning with humiliation, preparing to retreat into his anonymity. But Emily spun back toward Ethan, pulling away from her mother's grasp, and spoke, her voice suddenly loud and resonating through the shocked crowd. "I want to dance with him. He's the only one who sees me, Mom." The music stopped abruptly. The entire ballroom turned. Veronica stood rigid, her hand still reaching for Emily. It was the moment she understood. Her daughter wasn't being rebellious. She was making a desperate public plea for her mother's attention. A catering assistant who saw the scene later recounted, "The look in that little girl's eyes. It wasn't anger. It was the silent, heartbreaking look of a child starving for warmth, willing to take it from anyone, even the lowliest worker in the room. It broke my heart for her." Veronica slowly released Emily's hand. Her gaze was fixed, not on the gawking crowd, but on the janitor who was still keeping his head bowed, his exhaustion palpable. In that shattering moment, the fortress Veronica had built around her heart fractured. A heavy piece of corporate pride fell away, replaced by an unfamiliar, potent, and utterly overwhelming sensation. Searing guilt. The subsequent confrontation, hidden in a relatively discreet alcove, was laced with pain. Veronica kept her voice dangerously low, the habit of a CEO controlling a crisis. "Do you realize the damage you've caused? You've embarrassed me in front of every major shareholder." Emily's small body shook. "But you weren't looking at me, Mom," she whispered. The simple, unvarnished sentence didn't just silence Veronica. It ripped away the veneer of her professional success, exposing the cold, desolate landscape of their mother-daughter relationship. Veronica stood paralyzed, then slowly shifted her gaze back towards Ethan, the man she paid to clean the spills on her floors, who somehow possessed the moral authority she currently lacked. Ethan stood a few feet away, feeling the heavy atmosphere. He was about to escape back to his duty when Emily ran up and gripped his hand again. "Sir, my mom doesn't understand. Can you help me? Please." Ethan knelt down, bringing his face level with hers. His uniform smelled faintly of disinfectant and sweat, a world away from the luxury perfumes surrounding them. "You just want your mom to hear you, to truly hear what you're not saying," he murmured. Emily nodded fervently. Ethan gently squeezed her hand. "Then let me help you tell her." He stood and slowly walked Emily back towards Veronica, not with hostility, but with a rare quiet compassion. He was merely offering a conduit for the child's unheard pain. "Ma'am," Ethan said softly, his voice cutting through the layers of the CEO's arrogance, "your daughter doesn't need a new contract signed or a better investment strategy. She needs her mother to see her, to see the little girl who misses her." Veronica felt a sharp, agonizing stab, as if someone had twisted a knife in her chest. I have so much on my plate. The company is in a sensitive acquisition phase. I have to be here." "Hadiastanin," she stammered, the powerful CEO grasping desperately for a legitimate excuse. Ethan's reply was delivered without judgment, yet it carried the undeniable, painful weight of a father's total commitment. Ma'am, in the end, there is nothing, not one single thing, you are busy with that is more important than she is. You can acquire companies, but you can never acquire back lost time. The words coming from a man with nothing but a mop and a paycheck shattered her. Veronica's corporate facade finally crumbled. Hot, stinging tears streamed down her face. She sank onto a nearby velvet bench and wrapped Emily in a fierce, protective embrace. I'm sorry, baby. I am so sorry. I've been blind. Emily burst into tears, clinging to her mother, the sound of her released pain silencing the entire section of the ballroom. Ethan, seeing the private moment of healing begin, started to slowly back away. He didn't want to intrude further, but Emily pulled her head back from her mother's shoulder, her face streaked with tears and a sudden bright realization. Mom, he's a really good dancer. I know it. Veronica let out a choked, unexpected laugh through her tears. How do you know, sweetie? Did you hire him for an audit? Emily beamed, pointing at Ethan. No, I saw it in his eyes, Mom. They looked like they knew how to move. A warm wave of laughter and relieved chuckles finally broke the tension in the room. Veronica slowly rose, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, and looked straight at Ethan. Are you really a dancer, Mr. Cole? Ethan scratched the back of his neck, his cheeks flushing crimson with embarrassment. I used to teach a long time ago, Latin and ballroom. When my wife was alive, we ran a small studio together. Veronica paused, absorbing the quiet tragedy hidden within his simple statement. Then she made the final, monumental decision of the evening, a pivot more important than any business deal she had signed. Mr. Cole, would you dance just one song with my daughter and let me watch? The silence returned, heavier this time. Even the most hardened executives were leaning forward, captivated. Ethan looked around, slightly hesitant. Ma'am, I really don't want to draw more attention. I'm working. I'm not sure. Veronica cut him off, her CEO voice returning, but infused with a new, powerful vulnerability. I am the CEO here. I give you permission. Tonight, your work is to bring joy back to this room. Ethan smiled, a slow, genuine curve of his lips. In that case, I accept the assignment. The DJ, cued by a frantic hand signal from a relieved assistant, found a classic, gentle waltz. Ethan knelt before Emily, his posture suddenly transforming from weary janitor to confident instructor. He offered his hand. Princess Emily, do you want to lead, or shall I have the great honor? Emily's smile was a radiant, pure expression of joy. I'll lead. A collective, quiet sigh of contentment went through the crowd. Ethan placed her small hand carefully on his shoulder, securing a light, protective grip on her tiny waist. They started to move, tiny, deliberate steps. The man in the worn, smudged uniform, the little girl in the pristine, expensive dress, who had been invisible moments before. Two mismatched souls finding perfect harmony in the center of a greedy, luxurious world. The onlookers fell completely silent. All judgment vanished. The spectacle was too beautiful, too honest, too profoundly human to be mocked. Veronica stood nearby, her hand covering her mouth, the tears falling freely now. Not tears of guilt, but of overwhelming gratitude. She was finally seeing her daughter, truly happy, truly seen. When the music ended, the ballroom erupted in a wave of applause that lasted for nearly a full minute. Ethan executed a deep, graceful bow, and Emily hugged him fiercely around the waist. Veronica stepped forward. Ethan Cole, thank you. That was everything. Ethan started to refuse the compliment. I only helped because she was sad, ma'am. Veronica shook her head, her eyes locking onto his. No, you did more than that. You showed me the one thing I couldn't buy. Ethan held her gaze, his expression now serious and knowing. She only needed you to see her. All children do. A department director later commented to a colleague, I've been to every single gala since this company started. I've seen multi-billion-dollar deals sealed with a handshake. But the moment that Janitor danced with the CEO's little girl, That quiet, honest moment, that was the most beautiful, most real thing that has ever happened in this building. It felt like a public confession. The very next day, Veronica invited Ethan to her office again, but this time, the atmosphere was different. Less formal, more vulnerable. "You truly have a gift for connection," Veronica said, leaning back in her Italian leather chair. Ethan shrugged modestly. "My gift is only enough to buy decent groceries for my son, Leo." Veronica sighed, tapping her pen on her desk. "You're a single dad too?" Ethan nodded. 2 years this fall. My wife, Clara, was everything to me. After she was gone, it became just me and Leo. I needed the stability of this job. The raw truth in his voice, the quiet admission of being broken, softened Veronica, a feeling she rarely allowed herself to experience with any business acquaintance. From that conversation, Veronica made a conscious decision. She actively extended the invitation for Ethan to give Emily dance lessons every weekend. Ethan accepted, less for the meager payment, and more because Emily's quiet, wounded spirit resonated deeply with the early sadness he had witnessed in his own son, Leo. With every passing weekend, Emily's world began to fill with light. She laughed more freely, talked about her day and her panic attacks. Small moments of overwhelming anxiety started to recede. Veronica, in turn, began to observe Ethan more closely, learning to put her laptop down and truly see the relationship blossoming between the two of them. The three gradually created a comfortable, albeit unusual, small family structure. But the corporate world would not allow this connection to thrive in peace. A scathing article appeared in a major financial newspaper, followed by an aggressive blog post. The CEO's lapse in judgment. Kingston daughter dances with janitor. Is the corporation's class and integrity declining? Social media exploded. The comments were brutal, focusing on the class divide. Shareholders were immediately furious. An emergency, unscheduled board meeting was called. In the sterile boardroom, a veteran vice president pointed an accusatory finger directly at Veronica. "This is a PR disaster. You are damaging the company's valuation because of a low-grade employee. We need to terminate him immediately." Veronica's calm exterior finally broke. Her voice, usually composed, shook with indignation. "Ethan Cole is not low-grade. He is the most honest man in this entire building." "Then who do you choose, Veronica? The janitor and your misguided charity, or the future of Kingston Corporation?" Veronica slammed her hands on the mahogany table. Standing up so abruptly, her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I choose my daughter, and anyone who helps my daughter." But the pressure was too much for Emily. She saw the news reports on a tablet, the harsh words about Mr. Ethan, and spiraled into a severe panic attack. She hyperventilated, sobbing uncontrollably, clutching her chest. "Mom, call Mr. Ethan. I'm so scared they'll hurt him." Veronica, a master of billion-dollar crises, was utterly helpless in the face of her child's psychological trauma. She called Ethan immediately, her voice cracking. Ethan raced to the penthouse. He gently gathered the shaking Emily in his arms and began teaching her the controlled breathing exercises he had used with Leo. "Breathe in for 4, out for 6, princess. Watch me. We're a team." Emily clung to him, finding a safe harbor in his familiar, reassuring scent and touch. "Please don't go." Veronica watched the scene, tears pouring down her cheeks. She knew a crushing truth. Ethan was the only lifeline her child possessed. After Emily finally settled and fell asleep, exhausted, Ethan and Veronica sat quietly in the kitchen. Veronica's voice was a barely audible whisper, thick with shame. Why are you so good to her? To us?" Ethan looked her straight in the eye, his gaze unwavering. "Because I know exactly what it feels like for a child to be without their rock. I know what it's like to feel that void." Veronica asked, the words difficult to form. You felt that void yourself?" Ethan nodded. "When Clara died, Leo cried for a week straight. It wasn't just sadness, it was fear. He thought if I left the room for a minute, I would disappear forever too. Children don't just miss people, they fear the remaining world will abandon them." Veronica covered her face, the dam finally breaking. I never knew I was so completely awful to my child. I prioritized a contract over her security. Ethan gently took her wrist, his touch reassuring. You are not awful, Veronica. You are just exhausted. You just forgot how to prioritize the hug over the deadline. Veronica leaned her head against his shoulder, sobbing deeply. The first time in years she allowed herself this vulnerability in front of a man. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her gently, exactly as he held his son. Ethan, I don't want to lose her. I don't want to lose the people who truly matter to me anymore. Ethan held her tighter, whispering into her hair, You won't lose me. A week later, Veronica made her final, definitive move. She called an official, live-stream press conference. She stood at the podium and declared, The janitor that many of you chose to ridicule, he is the person who helped my daughter find her breath again. Ethan stood beside her, utterly bewildered by the attention. Veronica looked directly into the camera, taking Emily's small hand. If someone can show genuine kindness and commitment to my child, I do not care what title is on his uniform. The financial journalists were stunned, but millions of online viewers, especially single parents and those who valued kindness, were profoundly moved. Ethan looked at Veronica, seeing a heart transformed, but he was unprepared for the final, unexpected vow she made. And I believe, she concluded, her voice thick with emotion, that heart is now saving me too. Ethan stood frozen. She had just confessed her growing love in front of the world. As the world descended into photographic chaos, Veronica's eyes met his, gentle, determined, and fully committed to him. In the aftermath, the tide of public opinion shifted dramatically. The controversy morphed into a story of redemption and authentic human connection. Millions of people commented, that janitor's kindness is worth more than any corporate salary. Veronica stopped trying to hide her new reality. She actively included Ethan and Emily in her internal company life, introducing him to trusted colleagues simply as a man whose priorities are always right. Ethan still attempted to maintain some distance, fearing he might cause further professional damage, but Veronica gently, firmly pulled him into their shared world. The weekly dance sessions became a sacred, non-negotiable ritual for the three of them. Emily's confidence soared, and Veronica finally learned the liberating feeling of setting her laptop aside to simply hold her daughter until she slept. She started attending Emily's school events, a simple act that meant the world. One beautiful, quiet afternoon, as Veronica watched Ethan patiently teach Emily a tricky sequence of steps, Emily paused and asked Ethan the question that hung unspoken in the air. Mr. Ethan, do you like my mom? Ethan choked on his response, his face flushing deep red. Veronica, who was standing nearby, smiled genuinely, a blush creeping up her neck. What if he does like Mommy? What then? Ethan couldn't find the right words. The corporate setting and the difference in their world still weighed on him, but his heart was hammering against his ribs. Later that evening, as he walked Veronica and Emily back to their door, Veronica paused in the doorway, her gaze holding his for a long, meaningful moment. Ethan, yes, I know you're afraid to take another step. The distance feels safer, doesn't it? I understand that fear. I feel it too. Ethan remained silent, absorbing her absolute honesty. Veronica continued, her voice light yet utterly resolute. But if we both stay safe, if we both stay scared, then Emily will lose the most precious thing she just started to find again, a sense of a complete family. Ethan looked into her eyes that were once cold and calculating, but now shone with sincerity and a desperate tenderness. He saw not the CEO, but a woman who needed him. He took a step closer, breaking the invisible barrier between them. Veronica, I can't promise you a mansion or a corporate ladder. I can't promise you things I don't have, but I can promise you this. I will be here, every day, if you need a steady hand to hold on to. Veronica replied, her voice soft as a breath. I need you. Emily, sensing the shift, ran out and wrapped her small arms around both of them. So, Mr. Ethan is going to be our person, Mom? Veronica laughed through her tears, the sound pure and warm. If he wants to be, darling. Ethan answered immediately, his voice ringing with certainty. Absolutely, yes. Love, like true courage, isn't found in a grand external search. It is what you open your heart to receive. I will live kindly. 6 months had passed since the night of the dance. Ethan moved into a modest apartment closer to Veronica's home to ensure he was always nearby for Emily. They didn't feel the need to broadcast their dating status publicly anymore, but the three of them functioned perfectly as a family, sharing quiet Sunday morning breakfasts, coordinating Emily's school drop-offs, and holding their sacred weekly dance sessions. Ethan also started bringing his own son, Leo, around, and the two children quickly formed the bond of siblings, a final, beautiful layer of healing. One crisp Sunday morning, Ethan took both Emily and Leo to the park, while Veronica stayed home to prepare a large lunch. Watching Ethan navigate the two children, calmly mediating a disagreement over a swing, his attention equally divided, made Veronica's heart swell with an aching, profound softness. She stood before the huge panoramic window of her penthouse, placing her hand over her chest, and whispered to the quiet room, "Thank you for showing up." When Ethan, Emily, and Leo returned, tired and rosy-cheeked, Veronica called everyone into the elegant living room. On the antique coffee table sat a small, ornate music box she had bought years ago. "Ethan," she said, her voice filled with tenderness, "this is the melody of the first song I ever played for Emily when I brought her home from the hospital, the song I forgot how to hear." Ethan opened the box. A simple, beautiful, and heart-achingly warm melody filled the vast room. Veronica took a slow step towards him. "Now, will you dance with me, just once, to the song that started it all?" Ethan placed his hand on her waist, his touch firm, yet incredibly gentle. He led her onto the expensive rug, and they moved together, two people whose worlds should never have collided, finding perfect, effortless synergy. Emily and Leo sat silently on the couch watching, a radiant, shared smile lighting their faces. "Finally, Mom gets to dance," Emily whispered to Leo. When the last note of the music box faded, Veronica rested her head against Ethan's shoulder, tears of joy wetting his uniform. "Ethan, do you really think we're a family?" Ethan held her tightly, the question no longer holding fear, but certainty. "I don't think. I know. We have been a family, Veronica, since the day your little girl said, 'Will you dance with me?'" Veronica let out a profound, joyous laugh. Emily and Leo rushed over to hug their legs, and the four of them stood embraced, four once broken souls finding their complete, unexpected circle. Sunlight streamed through the windows, bathing the newly formed family in a warm, healing glow. The dance floor was clean, and the future was bright. True love and true family doesn't seek you out in the obvious places or the gilded halls. It finds you in the quiet, unexpected moment when someone finally sees your loneliness. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.